Did Pompeii know Vesuvius was a volcano?
Let's go.
Probably not. The evidence of this is really quite interesting. Pliny the Younger, who was the survivor of the eruption, he wrote these great eyewitness accounts of it. He had an uncle called Pliny the Elder.
Yeah.
And Pliny the Elder, before he died in the eruption, he wrote one of the earliest encyclopedias of natural history in the ancient world. And he had a whole section on volcanoes within this book. And he described volcanoes all over the world. He described Mount Etna in Sicily. He described volcanoes in Persia, in Ethiopia. But there's no Vesuvius in the volcano section of his encyclopedia.
Fantastic, fantastic. She's really, really well. Let me add to that. Sometimes you do think, like, why would people choose to settle near a volcano? Well, they did know about the type of soil. So would they have known that it was a volcano? Maybe were they just counting active volcanoes? Maybe they did know that this used to be a volcano, but it was a dormant one. It's possible that they didn't know. It's also possible that they did know, but they thought it was dormant and therefore safe. I think what really you could do, apart from reading the sources in this case, is approach it from the perspective of tephrochronology. And for those of you who don't know, tephrochronology is the dating of volcanic eruptions, and they do it through the examination of the layers, which are called tephra, which basically represent all the different materials that are ejected during a volcanic explosion of this type, or in general, a volcanic eruption. So you have ashes, you have lots of different stuff. Everything that is ejected, create layers, then they date it and they try to figure it out. What we know now is that before this explosion, this eruption, the previous one would have been prehistoric. Therefore, this means that there was, at this time, no living memory of any eruption in conjunction with the volcano or Mount Vesuvius. Thus, that's my opinion, either they did not know it was a volcano, like she's anticipating here, or they did know, but they didn't care because they didn't think that this was going to explode. They had no living memory. It never happened. Because again, prehistoric. I think it is fascinating. And then there are other things we can say. I don't know if she's going to talk about the earthquake. I do want to speak a little bit about that. So let's see if she does it.
Where he does describe Vesuvius, he describes it simply as a mountain that's watered by a particular river called the River Sarno. Another historian describes seeing sort of blackened rocks towards the summit of Vesuvius, but he interprets that as evidence of, he says, fires which had since been quenched. So
there we go. That's why I personally connect to that. I think they knew, but once again, no living memory, no ancestral memory. It just, nothing happened. They thought it was fine. They didn't think it was ever going to happen.
There's really strong evidence here that if people interpreted this as a volcano at all, they thought it had been extinct for a very long time, which actually it had. There was no reason why most people living in Pompeii at that time would have expected this to be anything other than a mountain. It was very, very green, it was verdant, it was covered in crops, so people were growing grapevines all the way up it.
So basically the benefits outweigh a possible perceived risk, which they did not perceive. That was their point of view, because once again, Pompeii was a very successful trading center. It was at the heart. In fact, we do know that not only they had an inward connection to major routes by land, as she says, it was basically built nearby or in front of the river Sarno. But then there is this lagoon that is described as well, precisely when the Sarno meets the front of the entrance of Pompeii, and there is evidence that they had a fully functioning port. So harbor, lots of boats, trading all over the place, the generations and generations of wealth accumulated. Yeah, they didn't think anything was going to happen, and it was a great spot.
People didn't see it as a threat. Were there warnings before the Pompeii eruption?
Let's see if the earthquake maybe.
Yes. We know that in the days immediately leading up to the volcanic eruption, there were a series of earth tremors or small earthquakes which shook Pompeii. And these would have been quite alarming in themselves, because about 17 years earlier, there'd been a really catastrophic earthquake which had caused a lot of damage to buildings within Pompeii.
That's the one mentioned on Naturale Questione, book 6 by Seneca. And is also the one mentioned by Posidonius. So the earthquake was major. And we are told that not only it killed people, it destroyed buildings, And when I say destroyed buildings, it didn't just destroy buildings in Pompeii, but it destroyed buildings in Herculaneum all the way to Naples. Although when it comes to Naples, we are told that the buildings that were destroyed were only private villas, so not any public property. And when I say public property, I mean the forum or arenas, anything that belongs to the state. Nothing was lost there. A lot of these would have been central. So what that tells me is that most likely Naples' outskirts were hit, and some of the private villas were damaged. 600 sheep are reported to have been dead because of this earthquake. So the earthquake was severe. And it is upon a recovering town that had already been partially damaged by the earthquake that the volcano will erupt in 79 and annihilate the population and completely cover it in ashes. It is very, very, unsettling. The volcanic soil was probably also very attractive to settlers, absolutely, because you can use it to diversify your crops and in fact help support larger population clusters. So it is advantageous, and that's why we still do it. How many towns today, even if we have the full understanding, geological understanding and all that, we still choose to settle nearby these places. So it's one of those situations. Thank you, Petit. I'm glad to hear that.
And Pompeii was still in the process of being rebuilt. There were still things which were being fixed and sort of replenished as a result of that. And what people didn't realise was that earlier earthquake was caused by magma beginning to rise up within the volcano. The volcano was beginning to wake up, but there was no reason why anyone would have put two and two together. And
yes, the causal link. They didn't have the geological, technological, at the end of the day, scientific understanding to connect it. Could they have? Now, how would you really think about it? Put yourself in their shoes. How would you? Like, yeah, there was an earthquake. Goodness gracious, I'm glad they survived. And boom, volcanic eruption.
And associated the two disasters. When did Pompeii erupt?
There we go.
This is a more complicated question than it looks. We can say definitively that it erupted in AD 79.
Yes.
But the exact timing of the eruption is still uncertain. Because
it is uncertain. I think it's between the 24th of October and the 21st of November, but definitely after September because of the coin of Emperor Titus, which was the 15th, can't think of the word right now, commemoration. It was a commemorative coin for the 15th year of his reign. And that was found. Therefore, if that had been minted already, this has to have happened after September. Did it happen in October or November? It's difficult to say. I think maybe she's going to mention that Pliny actually messes up when it comes to the date. He mentions August, but he was wrong 100% because the coin was already there. Probably a transcription error, in fact.
Our eyewitness accounts are two letters written by Pliny the Younger, see the historian of Tacitus, and a number of different manuscripts of these letters have come down to us. And lots of these manuscripts say completely different dates. So scholars who specialise in reading manuscripts have said that the date that looks the most secure within these manuscripts is the 24th of August. So
I disagree. So it's true what she's saying. Like, there are people that say that. I disagree because of the coin. So once you see that coin was found there and it commemorates the 15th year of Titus, it has to be that coin was minted after September. It cannot be in September. It cannot be August. So I'm not saying she's wrong. There are scholars that think this. So it is maybe you would have to question the coin as a finding. I think it's after September.
24th of August, AD 79 is the traditional date you'll find in a lot of old books about the eruption of Vesuvius. But more recently, archaeological evidence seems to suggest that the eruption took place later in the year. In particular, we can see that there were still leaves on the trees, but things like olives and figs and pomegranates had all been harvested, and that usually took place in September or October, not in August.
It seems like we agree then. At first I thought she was siding with her. No, she was just giving context and I was being a muppet and just not waiting. Let her speak, Metatron.
The wind direction seems to have been sort of accordant with what would happen normally later into autumn. And probably most excitingly, we have a charcoal message that's written on the side of a villa. And that gives us a date. It says on the 17th of October, or the Roman equivalent, he ate rather a lot, or something very sort of mundane like that. And bear in mind...
Sounds like me and pasta.
But charcoal just doesn't really survive for very long. It only takes some rainwater to wash it away. So it couldn't have referred to the previous October. It must refer to October AD 79. So it seems very likely that the volcano erupted after the 17th of October AD 79. Next question.
Splendid, but I wish you mentioned the coin. I'll see if I can find the coin for you in a little bit, but she is very knowledgeable. I really like her. Maybe she's my favorite up to now. Of all the experts that they have showcased on history, put on display, she is literally the best one so far. And can be really annoying when it comes to Pompeii, because it's the history. It's ancient Rome, it's the Mediterranean, it's my people, it's my area of the world. So I can be really like, when it comes to that. So I'm loving her presentation up to this point.
How did the Pompeii eruption happen? We know from the letter of Pliny the Younger that the eruption began with the appearance of a vast cloud emerging from the top of Vesuvius. And
that's the Plinian eruption.
Cloud was almost like a mushroom cloud. It was pine tree shaped in the description of Pliny the Younger. So it sort of billowed outwards. And it got higher and higher and higher. And volcanologists today speak of it exceeding 30 kilometers in height.
Yes.
Once that had happened, the dust contained within this cloud began to rain down quite heavily. And the pumice from it actually formed island-like masses on the water.
Pyroclastic flow. It's described how it was glowing in the dark as they were looking at this from the sea. So it must have been like hell. It must have been like really, really unsettling and impressive event.
So when people were trying to escape on the water, they found that their paths were actually impeded by what was coming from the top of this cloud. Gradually, that cloud sort of gave way, and what you had after it collapsed was a series of pyroclastic surges coming out of the volcano. So the whole nature of the eruption changed as it went on. So there was a whole series of events which kind of began with this earthquake 17 years earlier, then a sort of series of smaller earthquakes in the sort of immediate days leading up to it, and then sort of the Big Bang itself. So it's quite a drawn-out process. Next question.
Splendid. Before we move to the next question, I'm having a great time. I don't know about you, but this is good. At the beginning of this, when she spoke a little bit about whether the city of Pompeii was Roman or not, and I interjected a little bit, I did promise you that I would tell you a little bit about the myth. So you know how we have the myth of the founding of Rome, Romulus, Remus. I think everyone is familiar with that, and you're probably familiar with the idea that according to the myth, at least the way we are told, is that you have the Trojans led by Aeneas that leave after the destruction of Troy, and then they reach what would be modern day Lazio, so Latium at the time, the geographic area in the center of Italy where Rome is founded, and there they found people, and these people together with the Trojans, they fuse, create the Latins, and then we have, that's the beginning, at least when it comes to the myth. Now, what's interesting is that even though the idea of any connection with the Trojans is speculative and mythological in nature, we do know that indeed there was a people that lived in that area that probably preceded the Latins. And once the Latins do reach the region, they connect with these people, and then we have the Romans pretty much. The Latin expand. Ancient Romans do mention these originals, and they call them the aborigines, which is where the word aborigines comes from. And it can be translated as the originals or the ancient ones. There are two different terms that are used in Latin, and that's how you translate them. And it's a fascinating story when it comes to the beginning of the people that will become the Romans. When it comes to the founding of Pompeii, however, Strabo kind of speaks a little bit about it, but one of the things that we're told when it comes to the myth is that the city would have allegedly been founded by Hercules, the demigod himself. And I always thought that was fascinating because, Rome is the capital and it was founded by Romulus. Okay, great, maybe Latinus, King Latinus, but Aeneas is cool, but Hercules is Hercules. So you know what I mean? So I love it how the Romans and the ancients always, and the Greeks did that too, liked to connect cities with heroes, demigods, and gods, because even the word for Lazio, Latium, the region where Rome is built, it comes either from a word from Archaic Latin, which means the expanse, because of the valleys. Or mythologically, it could mean the hidden place hiding from Jupiter. That would be the mythological explanation. And then there is another explanation which says maybe it's just because that is one of the possible connections in archaic Latin would be with the word swamp or marshes. So it could be that they were considered the inhabitants of the marshes and the valleys, as opposed to the people of the hills, which were different Italic populations anyways. Fascinating stuff. But even in mythology, there is oftentimes a connection to reality. And I would say that mythology can be considered an interpretation of reality with the means that people had at the time.
Was there lava in Pompeii? No, and this is actually quite surprising for a lot of people. There wasn't actually lava in this particular type of eruption. It was a different kind of eruption which was dominated by stones, by dust, we call it a nuée ardente, these particular types of cloud which come down the mountainside. They're sort of balls of gas and rock, but absolutely no lava.
Really, because she did mention the magma earlier, so absolutely no lava, maybe less lava would be my approach. I mean, again, she's the expert, so do take what I say when it comes to this. I'm just speculating. What I said before, based on sources. This, personal speculation, so do take her position as she's the expert before mine. But maybe some lava, because at the end of the day, lava is the same as magma. The difference is that magma is when it's still inside, and lava is when it's outside. But it's still the same. Fused flowing rock, so absolutely no lava, and yet the sources tell us that there was luminescence at night, which to me sounds like lava. I don't know why she's so categorical about it. I'm going to have to ask Dr. Canestrelli, because he's more specialized than me when it comes to classical. He's one of my he's my lead researcher, in fact. I'll have to ask him about that.
Next question.